All right, Accounting 1 kiddos, welcome to Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is where we start to begin our what we call end of period work, meaning we've gotten to the end of a month or a year, and it's time for us to start preparing to create our financial statements and wrap up a period so that we can start the next one. So in Section 1 today, we're going to talk about creating a worksheet. We're going to talk about what a worksheet is, making a heading, and then preparing our trial balance on our worksheet. So first things first, our general ledger that we've been working with through Chapter 4 and a little bit in 5 contains information that our managers and our owners need. It's where all of our information for our accounts is stored. And so it's very important that we start to analyze, summarize, and report it in a meaningful way. Because if you remember what the definition of accounting is, it's analyzing, recording, and reporting the financial information of a business. So the accounting concept that comes into play here is something called consistent reporting. And that means that when we decide how we're going to record and report our information, we do that the same way every single period. So that way we can compare from one period to the next. If we change the way we're doing things, it doesn't allow us to compare anything. And comparing and analyzing is one of the most important steps of being an accountant. So, as I stated already, Chapter 6 starts what's called our end of period work. And so we need to define what a fiscal period is. And a fiscal period is the length of time for which a business is going to summarize its financial information and report on its financial performance. So sometimes a fiscal period can also be referred to as accounting period, but most of the time we hear it referred to as a fiscal period. A fiscal period that consists of 12 consecutive months is called a fiscal year. So what that insinuates for us is that typically fiscal periods are 1 month segments, and then obviously 12 of those put together is a fiscal year. Usually businesses will start a fiscal year on the first day of a month, and they usually choose to do it during a slow time. So for example, Target, let's take Target for example. I am guessing, I'm not a person at Target, but I'm going to guess that Target's fiscal year is probably going to end in June or July, and their next fiscal year would start on like July 1st or August 1st. And the reason they would do that is because that's typically a slow time for them. If you think of a busy time for retail, normally that has to do around the holiday season. So they would never end a fiscal year in the middle of a busy season like that. Same thing for our school district, for example. Their fiscal period ends on June 30th and starts again on July 1st. The reason being is that school is out. It's not a busy time for them. So you want to choose a time where the fiscal year can end, where you aren't so busy, because there's a lot of work involved in ending a fiscal period. So that brings us to our first end of period form, which is called a worksheet. And a worksheet is a columnar accounting form, which just means that it has columns on it, that's used to summarize our general ledger information that we need to prepare our financial statements. So remember that journals and ledgers are permanent records. A worksheet is just a planning tool. It's not actually considered a permanent record of our business. And that's something that's a little different, because up until this point, I've said journals are very, very important. They're permanent records. Ledgers are very, very important. They are permanent records. But a worksheet is simply a planning tool and not considered a permanent record for the business. So the reason that we use a worksheet is that it's a nice way to be able to summarize our general ledger accounts and first off prove that debits equal credits. Okay. Our second thing is that it helps us plan our changes that need to be made to bring certain accounts up to date. The third is it allows us to separate our different accounts into the different financial statements that we make, whether that is an income statement or a balance sheet. And then it also allows us to calculate net income or net loss. So it's actually a very helpful planning tool, and that's the reason that accountants use it. So first things first, we always do our heading on the top of a worksheet. So that starts out with the name of the company. The name of the accounting form we're using is simply called a worksheet, so that's all that's put up there. And then we have for the month ended January 31st. It is important that you include the words for month ended, and if you were doing this for a year, you would want to say for year ended, and then you obviously wouldn't put January 31st, you just put 2019, 2020, whatever it happens to be. So the very first thing that we do on our worksheet is something called a trial balance. And a trial balance is simply a proof of the equalities of debits and credits in our general ledger. So essentially what we do is we list every single account that's in our chart of accounts. As you can see down here, I put it in green. All account titles are listed even if they don't have balances. So we run down our entire chart of accounts, and then if they have a balance, we put a debit. If they have a balance as a credit, we put a credit, and then we want to make sure that those are equal. So this is what it looks like here. This is a shortened version. You can see that we write our general ledger titles here, all of our accounts that are in our business, and then we write all of our accounts balances, either debits or credits. And I want you to just look at a few of these here. Income summary here is listed, but it does not have a balance. That's okay. We'll learn about income summary here shortly. Insurance expense is listed, but there is no balance. That's fine. Same thing with supplies. You just leave it blank. If that account does not have a balance, you still write it down. You just leave it blank. And the third step is obviously to do a single rule because we're going to total. We total these two up. This is really where you're going to kind of say a hope and a prayer that these two numbers equal. If they don't, what that means is somewhere in that month or somewhere in that year, you have an error in your transactions or in your posting. Which, if you think about that, think about the number of transactions that you could have for a business. If you think about Target, for example, think about how many hundreds of millions of billions of transactions they do every day. So you want these two numbers to equal. Okay, so we hope for that. If they do, then we do a double line because that means that our debits equal our credits. Okay, and so that is all we're doing in this intro lesson in chapter 6 is we're going to do a heading, and then we are going to do a trial balance and get our worksheet started. So we can head over to MindTap, and we're going to do our 6-1 work together.